Hi, and welcome back to this Free for All Friday edition on Focal Point AFR Talk. Busy program today. We got time for phone calls in this last segment. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Give us a call. We'll try to get as many phone calls in as we can in this last segment. 888-589-8840. Let's grab clip number 9 if we can. Rob, we were talking about President Obama's foreign policy earlier. Here is Jen Psaki. She is the spokesman for the State Department, and she's explaining here what the problem is with President Obama and his foreign policy. We had Howard Dean. We had the guy from NPR says, look, I don't understand a single thing you're saying. Can you summarize your foreign policy in one statement? President Obama says, no, I can't do that. With Ronald Reagan, it was stop communism. With Abraham Lincoln, it was preserve the Union. Can you summarize? No, I can't do that. So he doesn't have a coherent foreign policy that can be summarized concisely like other presidents have had. Now, Howard Dean says, well, the reason is that he's just too sophisticated. Even the media doesn't have the smarts to keep up with this guy. He's just eons beyond the rest of us in the way he thinks. Now, here's Jen Psaki talking about what she thinks is another part of the problem, why President Obama doesn't get more credit for his foreign policy.
I would argue the president doesn't give himself enough credit for what he's done around the world, and that's how the secretary feels too. We would not be engaged in comprehensive negotiations with Iran, which is where the program is stalled and is rolling back, if it were not for the role of the United States, along with the P5+1 partners, certainly. Ukraine, we've been engaged more or as much as any other country in the world in supporting the elections process and supporting the government and supporting their efforts moving forward. Yes, there's more work that needs to be done. The point is we need to continue to stay at it.
But isn't this a potential mission accomplished situation?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
You would argue the president doesn't give himself enough credit? How much credit would you give him?
Well, I think I would give him more than he has given himself. That's what I just said.
Credit?
So would the secretary.
For
what?
For what? Yes, exactly. That's
no. I mean, I don't mean like he doesn't deserve credit. I mean, I'm talking what specifically you're talking. He doesn't get enough credit for. That's what I'm saying. For
engagement in issues like Iran, what we've done on Ukraine, efforts to dive in and engage around the world.
Russia has still annexed Crimea. I mean, Iran, there's ongoing negotiations, but is that the success here that you're talking? We're
talking about engagement in the world and taking on tough issues that present themselves, and the United States continues to play a prominent role doing that.
Oh, poor Jen Psaki. They're laughing at her. The media is laughing at her, and they're laughing at Obama. That's what's kind of amazing about that. They're stunned. President Obama doesn't give himself enough credit. Well, how much credit would you give him for what he's doing? And then somebody else says, well, give him credit. Credit for doing what? What has he done that would merit patting himself on the back? Well, we're involved. We are engaged. Did you get those words? He's engaged. He's involved. He hasn't actually done anything. He hasn't accomplished anything, but he is engaged in the process and wants credit for that. It's like, like getting a participation ribbon. All right, one last clip, and then we'll go to the phones. 888-589-8840 is the number. Bob Engel, speaking of President Obama's foreign policy, Bob Engel of NBC talking with Frank Langone, who is the former, I think he's the founder maybe of Home Depot. Maybe that's what he is. Anyway, they're having a conversation about President Obama and his foreign policy. And here's what Langone asked Bob Engel of NBC News.
With whom we have better relationships with today than we did when he became president of the United States almost 6 years ago.
You would naturally want to say Europe, but generally the relations with a lot of European countries have gotten worse because of these relationships. And this is sort of what I was about to say. I think a lot of our...
I can name all the countries where the relationships have gotten worse. I'm asking you to give me one country where they've gotten better.
Yeah, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find that. And I think this is the reason. Even our allies...
Well, okay.
Yeah, and I think the reason is our allies have become confused. For 8 years, you had the Bush administration with a very interventionist policy, driving into world affairs, driving primarily into the Islamic world, army first or fist first, and that was very unpopular with most of our allies, but toward the end, after 8 years, people adjusted to it. Now you have a presidency that for the last 6 years is pulling out very rapidly, and that is creating a kind of a pump action, a vortex of instability that has left allies like Saudi Arabia, like Egypt, like even some European countries, very confused.
Number is 888-589-8840, and this is kind of an amazing exchange. You know, Langone asked Bob Engel, NBC, their foreign affairs correspondent expert guy, name me one country where we have a better relationship today than we did when President Obama became president. And he says, well, let's see. Let's start with Europe. And then he says, no, that won't work. Our relationships have gotten worse with everybody in Europe. And Langone says, look, I can tell you all the countries that have gotten worse. I want you to name me one country where they've gotten better. And Bob Engel, NBC News, mainstream media, I think you would be hard-pressed to find that, even one. And then Engel goes on to say, look, our allies are confused by this president, at least with Bush. Now, he's critical of Bush, but at least with Bush, you had clarity. You knew what he was about. You knew what he was going to do. You knew what and why he did it, and you knew when he was going to do it. There was clarity and there was definition there, but the allies are just confused by this president. According to NBC, he's been pulling out instead of engaging. I mean, Jen Psaki talking about the fact he's engaging. That's what he's accomplished. Doesn't get enough credit for engagement. Well, Bob Engel, NBC, saying it's the other way around. He's pulling out. He's disengaging. He is withdrawing, and that's creating a vortex of instability. That's kind of an amazing statement. President Obama creating a vortex of instability that has left our allies very confused. All right, let's go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's start with Dave, Hopewell, Virginia. Dave, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hello, Brian. I'm glad you're back in the saddle again.
Thank you very much.
All right. First comment I wanted to make, a little while ago, you said the Republicans were running up the white flag all over the country, regarding this same-sex marriage.
Yes.
Well, that white flag, I'm here to tell you that white flag is a windsock. That's what their flag is. But that's not really why I called. I wanted to call regarding Obama's speechifying here recently. I came to the conclusion shortly after he took the office. I came to the conclusion that nothing that man says is of any value. If he says something that's pleasant to hear, he probably doesn't believe it, and it's probably not going to happen. And if he says something unpleasant, it's kind of a wait and see if it comes to fruition, which it may or may not do. That is to say that with me, nothing he's ever said has ever carried any weight at all, just by him saying it.
Well, and it's interesting to me. I think probably there are a lot of folks that look at it the same way that you do, Dave. And Dave, let me have you turn your radio down so you don't get any interference there. But Dave, I just think probably a lot of Americans look at President Obama the same way that you do. And I mean, honestly, just objectively, it's just hard to really trust much of what he says, and we want to do that with the president. We have such respect for the office. We want to be able to believe what we hear from the president. We want to be able to trust it. We want to give it credibility. That's what we want. That's our instinct, but it's very, very difficult to do it with this president. All right, Dave, you think you got a lot of company out there. Let's go to Carmi in Beckley, West Virginia. Carmi, welcome. What's on your mind?
I would like to make 3 comments and give credit where credit's due to President Barack Obama.
All right, hit me.
I may be a little sarcastic, but I'm a conservative Christian, and I'm a disabled U.S. Marine. And Ronald Reagan, you knew where he was, and he was a military man. He was in the cavalry. Bush was in the military. Most of the presidents we have had have served, and you could track them. Barack Obama does three things really well. He hides his whereabouts when something's going on with our nation where his presence would be needed very well.
Mm-hmm.
He relaxes very well during those times, and he eats very well from what I can tell on the news.
Well, there you go. Now,
I just thought I'd share that today.
Well, Carmen, you've just given, Jen Psaki saying he doesn't give himself enough credit for what he does, and the media saying, well, what? They're just laughing at her. What has he done that he should get credit for? Well, I think, Carmen, you've just given Jen Psaki an answer to that question from the media. What has he done for which he should get credit? He hides when there is a crisis. He relaxes when there isn't one, and he eats pretty well the rest of the time. So those are three pretty significant accomplishments.
That's hard for most presidents to do.
Yeah. All right, Carmi. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. That's a creative call. All right, well, that is it for today. Hope you have a terrific weekend. Enjoy some time off. Get your Sabbath in there somewhere. Believe in a Sabbath rest. And what I mean by that is I think we're wired in such a way that we need to have 24 hours every week where we don't do anything that we don't want to do. So get yourself some Sabbath rest this weekend. Worship God on Sunday. We'll see you back here on Monday. Medicare, by the way, Medicare now going to start paying for sex change operations, if you can believe it. Your tax dollars and mine. Here's a blessing for your weekend. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Bow low before God. Stand tall before man. Stand in the gap. Never forget, we're fighting a winnable war. You're now free to move about the weekend.